Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're taking a close look at something many of you have probably thought about, learning English on your own. We've got this really fascinating personal account, basically a video transcript from someone who actually managed it, without formal classes.
Right.
And our mission today is pretty straightforward. Pull out the most valuable lessons from their experience
Yeah.
and give you some actionable stuff you can use for your own learning goals, whatever they might be.
Absolutely. And this isn't just like a story. It's more of a roadmap, really. It's full of hurdles we can all relate to, but also strategies that actually worked.
Like learning from someone who's already walked the path.
Exactly. Think of it that way.
Yeah.
What really jumped out at me right away was the why. The reason this person decided to learn English.
Okay.
It wasn't just, oh, English is useful. It was tied to something deeper, like wanting a better life.
Okay, let's dig into that why then. The source really stresses how, English is just everywhere today.
It really is.
The internet, movies, music, books, you name it. And this person felt like not knowing it was a real barrier.
Right, like they were missing out.
Exactly. Missing out on fully engaging with, a huge chunk of the world. So for you listening, this kind of highlights a key point, right? Pinpointing where English would make a real difference in your life. That can be a super strong motivator.
And what's interesting is how that big idea, English being everywhere, turned into specific, frustrations. It wasn't just knowing it was important in theory. It was things like watching a movie and missing the jokes because there were no subtitles. Or hearing a song and having zero clue what the lyrics meant.
Right, or trying to find info online and hitting a wall.
Exactly that. That feeling of being sort of on the outside looking in, that seems to have been a massive driver for that.
And there's that one specific moment mentioned in the account, watching an interview with a favorite celebrity.
Oh yeah, I remember that part.
But with no subtitles. We've all been there, haven't we? You're excited to watch and you just catch bits and pieces.
So frustrating.
That disappointment seems like it was a real turning point. It shifted to English from just being, a nice-to-have skill.
To an absolute essential.
Yeah, which kind of suggests that sometimes maybe a negative experience, that frustration, can actually be a stronger motivator than just wanting something positive. What do you think?
That's a really good point. Often, those moments where you feel stuck or limited, they can crystallize your goals much more clearly than just like a vague desire.
Makes sense.
It creates a real tangible problem you actively want to fix. And the why wasn't just personal enjoyment either.
Right.
The source also mentions career advancement. That's huge for a lot of people listening, I bet.
Definitely.
In this interconnected world, speaking English just opened up so many doors, international jobs, working with people globally, business growth. It's a practical skill with clear professional payoffs.
And beyond the career stuff, the desire to travel was also mentioned, a big motivator. English kind of acts like a bridge, right? A common language. What's the term? Lingua franca?
Lingua franca, exactly. It means a common language people with different native tongues use to communicate.
So it lets you navigate new places, ask for help, connect with people from totally different backgrounds. It really shows how learning a language can just unlock a whole new way of experiencing the world.
Precisely. And if you think about it, it taps into a basic human desire, connection.
Yeah.
The source talks about genuinely wanting to make new friends, understand other cultures, join those global online communities.
Right.
English becomes the tool for that cross-cultural chat and understanding. It changes the internet from just, a place to get info.
Into somewhere you can actually participate and connect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Space for active engagement.
So what might have started as just a thought, maybe I should learn English someday, it grew into this feeling of, no, I need this for my own growth to reach my goals. It wasn't just about learning a skill, it was about breaking down walls and getting access to a much bigger world. Okay, so they had this powerful why. Now, let's get into the initial hurdles, the first steps into that world of self-learning, which can feel pretty daunting.
Oh yeah, this is where their story gets super relatable.
Yeah.
That initial feeling, just being totally overwhelmed by all the resources out there.
So common. Books, videos, apps, websites.
It can feel paralyzing, right?
Right.
And then you add in having a limited budget, needing to stick to free or cheap options.
Yeah.
That adds another layer.
Sure.
Their first approach, just trying a bit of everything they found online. That's also really typical.
Which probably tells us, for listeners, maybe don't feel like you have to try everything. Focus on finding a few things that work for you.
That's great advice. Curated learning. And the source gives specific examples of what they tried early on, starting with the classics, grammar books and dictionaries.
Ah, yes. The grammar grind. Sounds like a familiar path for many people.
Totally. Starting with the basics, the rules, but then quickly feeling kind of bored, confused even.
And struggling to stay motivated studying all alone.
Exactly. And maybe relying too much on just the rules early on. That can, as we see here, kind of kill your confidence when it comes to actually speaking.
Right. It often works better to actually try talking alongside the grammar stuff, not just before it.
This really touches on how we learn best, doesn't it? Understanding the structure is important, sure, but just learning abstract rules can be, well, pretty demotivating for a lot of us.
So what changed?
The shift to reading short stories for beginners, that seems to have been a real breakthrough.
Ah, okay.
Suddenly the language was in a story, you know. It made learning vocabulary and seeing how sentences work much more engaging, more natural.
Absolutely. Short stories give you that context. They're easier to handle, more interesting, and you see the language actually doing something. It reinforces those grammar points without feeling like homework.
A much more organic way to learn.
So from stories, they moved into watching stuff, videos, movies.
Yep. And the way they did it was smart. Starting with English movies, but with subtitles in their own language.
Yeah, to follow the plot.
And then gradually switching over to English subtitles. It lets you keep up while slowly tuning your ear to the sounds and rhythm of English.
But that initial difficulty understanding fast speech, that must have been tough.
Oh, totally. Almost everyone goes through that. But the key, like the source says, is actively watching.
How so?
Pausing the video, writing down new words, even saying the sentences out loud to practice pronunciation, that active approach makes a huge difference compared to just passively watching.
And they specifically mention YouTube channels, right, for English learners?
Yes. The variety there is amazing. You've got channels doing simple grammar, others showing everyday conversations. It offers different ways to learn depending on what you need.
Hearing real conversations seems so important. It shows you how people actually talk, not just how textbooks say they talk.
That's where you hit the real texture of the language, you know, the speed, the slang, the idioms that aren't always obvious.
Right.
It's a good reminder that learning a language isn't just memorizing lists. It's about understanding actual communication.
And normalizing that initial feeling of, wow, this is hard.
Exactly. It is hard at first. It's normal. Focusing on just getting a little better each time helps you keep going.
Okay, then we get to mobile apps.
Ah, the apps. Yeah, the source mentions using them for vocabulary and grammar practice.
And they can be fun, right? The gamified approach making it feel less like studying.
Definitely. Makes it more interactive. And things like a word of the day feature. That's a nice, easy way to consistently learn something new.
But there's always a but.
Yeah, the source is pretty clear on limitations. Apps are great for building foundations, reinforcing stuff.
But not enough for actual conversation practice.
Exactly. You need more than just tapping buttons to get comfortable talking to people, which really just highlights that you need a mix of methods, you know, a blended approach.
Which brings us neatly to the big one, speaking. Often the most intimidating part.
Oh yeah, the fear of making mistakes, feeling shy about trying to say things in a new language. Totally normal hurdles.
It feels vulnerable putting yourself out there like that.
It really does. But the initial strategy they used, practicing talking out loud to themselves in a mirror, that's actually quite clever.
How so?
It builds confidence in a totally safe space. Practicing simple things, introducing yourself, talking about your day, describing what's around you. It just gets you used to the physical act of making English sounds and sentences.
And that other habit they mention, trying to think in English during the day.
Fantastic technique. Just mentally describing what you see or what you're doing. It helps internalize the language, makes it feel more automatic over time.
And we shouldn't forget writing.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Keeping a notebook for new words and phrases. That's a classic. For a reason, it helps things stick.
But they took it further, right? Actually writing paragraphs.
Yes, writing short bits about their daily life, their thoughts, goals. That's where you really practice putting grammar and vocabulary together naturally.
And the advice was not to worry too much about mistakes at first.
Crucial mindset. Just focus on getting your ideas out. Writing becomes this tool for active recall, for strengthening your grasp of how sentences work.
And then you can slowly build up to longer texts, maybe even emails later on.
Exactly. Now, through all of this self-study, staying motivated and consistent, That's often the biggest battle.
Absolutely. The source mentions hitting those plateaus, feeling like progress is too slow, having days where you just want to quit.
We've all been there with learning anything new, right?
Yeah.
That initial buzz wears off and you realize, wow, this takes sustained effort.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest part, as they point out, is keeping going after that initial excitement fades.
So what worked?
Creating a realistic study schedule,
Mm?
aiming for a manageable amount each day, maybe just 30 minutes. That consistency is key.
Right. Establishing a routine helps avoid those long gaps that can really set you back.
Totally.
Mhm.
And pronunciation was another common challenge mentioned, especially if English has sounds your native language doesn't.
So how did they tackle that?
The strategy was actively listening to native speakers and really trying to copy them, repeating sounds and words. It feels awkward at first, but it works.
And finally, motivation itself. It's not static, is it?
Not at all. It ebbs and flows. The source mentions things like reminding yourself why you started, celebrating the small wins,
Yeah, acknowledging progress.
and even finding inspiration in other people's learning stories. It's all about feeding that internal drive and recognizing how far you've actually come.
Okay, so after navigating those initial challenges and finding ways to stay motivated, the focus shifted to building a solid daily practice routine.
Exactly. And the source gives us a really detailed picture of what that looked like. It seems they made a real effort to weave English into their morning.
How did they do that?
Starting the day listening to easy English podcasts, maybe while making breakfast or getting ready. The key was focusing on the main ideas, not stressing about every single word. It's like passive immersion to start the day.
Good idea. And the speaking practice.
That morning mirror talk again. Just chatting to themselves about their plans for the day. It reinforces speaking and gets the brain thinking in English early on.
And that shadowing technique they mentioned, listening to short clips and repeating right after.
Oh yeah, that's super effective. It really helps with pronunciation, the rhythm, the intonation of natural speech. You're basically training your mouth and ears together.
Makes sense. So morning was listening and some speaking. What about the afternoon?
Afternoon seemed more focused on active learning, reading and writing.
But keeping it manageable.
Exactly. Starting with simple stuff, children's books, beginner articles, easy news sites, makes reading less daunting, more fun. And the habit of writing down new words with example sentences. That's crucial for remembering them and knowing how to use them.
Yeah, context is everything.
For sure. And that daily writing practice, just a paragraph about their life or thoughts. Brilliant way to naturally use the grammar and vocab they're learning.
Plus, using apps for grammar checks gives that quick feedback.
And targeted grammar study, picking one rule at a time using apps or YouTube, stops you from feeling totally swamped by all the rules.
Okay, so morning and afternoon covered. What about winding down in the evening?
They cleverly merged learning with relaxing, watching English movies or TV shows with subtitles.
Starting with native language ones if needed, then switching to English.
Yep, that gradual progression. And the technique of rewatching scenes, first just for fun, then again focusing on the language, pausing and repeating lines, that turns passive watching into active practice for listening and speaking.
Smart. And just before bed.
A quick review of the day's new words and grammar points, plus maybe reading something aloud for pronunciation practice. It helps cement the learning before sleep.
It sounds like a really well-rounded daily routine. What about weekends?
Weekends were for mixing it up, keeping it fresh.
Yeah.
Watching things like travel vlogs or cooking shows, great for picking up specific vocabulary and context.
And playing English learning games online.
Yeah, makes practice feel less like work. Also challenging themselves with practical writing, like emails, and joining online language forums for interaction.
So throughout all this daily effort, keeping that motivation going was still key.
Absolutely. The source acknowledges, progress feels slow sometimes, frustration sets in. It's normal.
And the simple act of tracking progress on a calendar helped.
Yeah, just seeing those check marks can be surprisingly motivating. A visual reminder that you are putting in the effort.
And they also stress balancing the different skills, right? Reading, writing, listening, speaking.
Super important. A balanced routine means you're developing all areas, not just focusing on one and neglecting others.
So the core advice seems to be, practice a bit every day, mix up your activities, find stuff you actually enjoy.
And crucially, don't be scared of making mistakes. That really sums up the approach to successful independent learning.
But even with the best routine, mistakes do happen. It's part of the journey.
Oh, definitely. And the source is refreshingly honest about the key mistakes they made along the way, which is super helpful for the rest of us.
So what were some of those big ones?
One major one was spending way too much time just on grammar rules.
Without actually speaking.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
classic trap, feeling like you need perfect grammar before you can dare to talk. But that just holds you back.
Leads to hesitation, lack of confidence.
Totally paralyzing for some people.
Okay, what else?
Being too scared to speak because of, well, fear of judgment, worrying about making errors.
That anxiety is real. What will people think?
But the big realization they had was, you're never going to feel 100% ready. Speaking, even with mistakes, is essential. It's how you learn and improve.
Can't wait for perfect. Another mistake mentioned was neglecting listening skills, focusing too much on reading and writing.
Yes. It's easy to think passive listening isn't as important as actively producing language. But strong listening skills are fundamental for actual communication.
Plus, spoken English can be so different from written English.
Oh, yeah. Pronunciation, contractions, slang, idioms.
Yeah.
You need to train your ear by listening consistently.
Okay, another one. Trying to memorize just massive lists of vocabulary.
The endless lists. Yeah, without context, it's like pouring water into a sieve.
The words just don't stick.
Right. You need to learn them in sentences in real situations to understand how they're actually used. That makes them memorable.
And comparing yourself to other learners, feeling discouraged.
Such a common trap. Seeing someone else who seems fluent and feeling like you're lagging behind.
Yeah, that can really kill your motivation.
But the source makes a great point. Everyone's journey's different. Different backgrounds, learning styles, pace. Focus on your progress. Celebrate your small wins. Forget the comparisons.
Good advice. And the last mistake mentioned was inconsistency.
Yeah, those bursts of intense study followed by long breaks where you do nothing.
Doesn't really work long term.
Nope. Consistency, even just a little bit each day, is way more effective than those intense but sporadic efforts. It's about building a sustainable habit.
Okay, so those are the mistakes. What about the lessons learned from those mistakes?
Right, the takeaways. These are really valuable. First off, grammar.
Yeah.
Yes, it's helpful, but it shouldn't stop you from speaking.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, basically.
Exactly. Learn phrases, start talking, even if it's not perfect. Fluency comes from practice, not just rule following.
And mistakes.
Embrace them. They're normal. They're necessary for growth. Don't wait until you feel ready. That day might never come. Just start speaking.
And the lesson about listening.
Crucial. Actively develop it. Focus on the general meaning first, the context. Don't get stuck on every single word initially. Build comprehension gradually.
Makes sense. And for vocabulary?
Learn it in context. Sentences, real situations. That improves memory and your ability to use the words correctly.
And ditch the comparisons.
Absolutely. Focus on your own path, your own progress. Celebrate every step, no matter how small it seems.
And the final big lesson.
Consistency, consistency, consistency. A little bit every single day beats infrequent cramming sessions, hands down. Build that steady rhythm.
Okay, so building on those lessons, what were the strategies that they found most helpful? The things that really moved the needle?
Right, the practical techniques. One of the biggest ones was creating an immersive environment. Just surrounding yourself with English daily.
How? Like changing your phone language?
Yeah, simple things like that. Following English speakers on social media. Making English a constant sort of background presence in your life, not just a study time thing.
Those small exposures add up.
They really do. And then YouTube again.
Yeah.
But using it effectively.
Not just passive watching.
Right. Taking notes, repeating phrases aloud.
Yeah.
Using the huge variety of content, grammar lessons, real conversations, stories to fit your specific needs and style. Active learning while watching.
Podcasts and audiobooks were also highlighted.
Hugely helpful. Starting with beginner podcasts, slower speech, builds listening skills gently, and audiobooks, especially if you follow along with the text. Great for connecting sound and spelling.
And movies, TV shows as actual learning tools.
Yes. That progression with subtitles native language, then English. Rewatching scenes, specifically for language, that pause and repeat technique turns entertainment into serious practice.
What about practicing speaking when you're alone?
Finding creative ways to do that is key. Talking to yourself out loud, describing things, planning your day, even recording yourself on simple topics.
Recording yourself. That sounds daunting, but probably useful.
It really is. Helps you hear your own pronunciation issues. It's surprisingly effective for building confidence without pressure.
And finally, language exchange apps.
Absolutely essential, according to the source. Connecting with native speakers, other learners. That gives you the real-world conversation practice you just can't get from apps or books alone. Helps overcome that speaking shyness, too.
And within speaking practice, they mentioned some very specific techniques.
Yeah, some really concrete tips,
Yeah.
like talking to yourself in the mirror, using prepared questions to give it structure,
Okay.
recording your voice to track progress and spot problems, preparing topics before a language exchange chat so it's more focused.
Shadowing again came up.
Yes, listening and repeating immediately after a native speaker. Great for pronunciation, rhythm, intonation.
Learning whole phrases, not just single words.
Big one for fluency.
Yeah.
And prioritizing clear pronunciation over speed. Better to be understood than to talk fast, but unclearly.
Wow. Okay. So putting all those strategies together, it paints a picture of really living with the language, doesn't it? Not just studying it.
Exactly, making it an active, vibrant part of your daily life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into learning English independently, what are the final key takeaways for everyone listening?
I think the main message is really to embrace the whole journey. Yeah. Understand and accept that making mistakes isn't just okay, it's actually a crucial part of getting better. And that consistency, combined with using these kinds of practical, varied strategies, that will lead to progress. It will lead to improvement over time.
And that leads us perfectly to our final thought for you, our listener. Just take a second to think. What really resonated with you from this whole discussion, this look into someone's self-learning journey? And maybe more importantly, what's one small thing, one actionable step you could commit to doing today to move your own learning forward, whatever your goal might be? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at something many of you have likely considered: learning English on your own. We've got a fascinating personal account, basically a video transcript from someone who actually did it, navigated this without formal classes.
Right.
Our mission is simple: pull out the best lessons from their experience and give you, well, actionable insights you can use for your own learning goals.
Absolutely. And this isn't just, a story. It's more like a roadmap. It's full of relatable hurdles and, importantly, strategies that worked.
Yeah.
Think of it like learning from someone who has already walked the path you're thinking about. What really jumped out at me right away was the powerful why.
Ah, okay.
The reason behind this person deciding to learn English, it wasn't just like a casual thing. It was tied to something deeper, wanting a better life.
Okay, let's dig into that why a bit. The source really hammers home how everywhere English is these days.
Yeah, it really is.
The internet, movies, music, books, you name it. This person felt like not knowing English was a genuine barrier, stopping them from fully getting involved with so much stuff out there. For you listening, this kind of highlights a key point. Figuring out those specific ways English would make a difference in your life. That can be a huge first motivator.
And what's interesting is how this sort of abstract idea, English being everywhere, became really concrete frustrations for them.
Right.
It wasn't just knowing intellectually, oh, English is important. It was the actual experience of, say, watching a movie and missing jokes without subtitles.
Yeah.
Or hearing a song and having zero clue what it meant. Or finding tons of info online that was just locked away. That feeling of being on the outside looking in, that seems key.
And there's this one moment in the account, it's really relatable actually, watching an interview with a favorite celebrity, but no subtitles. We've all been there, haven't we? You tune in, you're excited, and you can only catch bits and pieces.
So frustrating.
Exactly. That feeling of disappointment, it seems like that was a real turning point. It shifted English from just being like a nice skill to have to something essential.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, sometimes maybe a negative experience is actually a stronger push than just a positive goal. What do you think?
That's a really interesting point. Often, those moments of frustration or feeling limited, they can crystallize our goals much more clearly than just vague desires.
Right.
It creates a real tangible problem you actively want to fix. And the why wasn't just personal enjoyment either. The source also mentions career advancement.
A big one for many.
Definitely. In today's world, being fluent in English just opens up so many doors: international jobs, collaborations, business growth. It's a practical skill, plain and simple.
And beyond the job stuff, the desire to travel was also mentioned, right? English acts as this kind of bridge, a common language.
A lingua franca, yeah.
Yeah, a lingua franca, exactly. That lets you navigate new places, ask for help, connect with people from totally different backgrounds. It really shows how learning a language can just unlock a whole new way of seeing the world.
Exactly. A lingua franca just means, a common language people use when they don't share a native one. And linking this to a wider human need, it's about connection, isn't it? The source talks about wanting to make new friends, understand other cultures, join in global online communities. English becomes that tool for talking across cultures. It turns the internet from just, like, reading stuff to actually engaging with people everywhere.
So, what might have started as just an idea kind of grew into a real need for personal growth, for reaching goals. It wasn't just about learning a skill, it was about knocking down walls and getting access to a much bigger world.
Precisely.
Okay, so they had this powerful why. Now let's get into the initial challenges and those very first steps they took, because self-learning can be, well, pretty daunting.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where their story gets super relatable. That initial feeling, being totally overwhelmed by all the resources out there, so common.
Yeah, books, videos, apps, websites.
It's paralyzing.
Yeah.
And then add in a limited budget, meaning you have to rely on free or cheap options. That adds another layer.
Right.
Their first approach, trying a bit of everything they found online, that's also really typical. For listeners, this really underlines the importance of maybe curated learning. Don't feel you need to try every single thing. Find a few resources that click with how you learn and what you want to achieve.
And the source gives specifics about their early tries, starting with the classics, grammar books and dictionaries.
Yes.
The foundation.
Sounds familiar, right? Starting with the rules, but then quickly feeling kind of bogged down by dry exercises. And finding it hard to stay motivated studying alone.
Totally.
Relying too much on grammar rules right at the start, like we see here, can actually hurt your confidence when it comes to speaking. It's often better to focus on actually using the language alongside the grammar study. That brings up a really important point about how we actually learn best. I mean, understanding the structure is vital, sure, but just drilling abstract rules, it can be really demotivating for a lot of people.
Definitely.
The shift they made, moving to reading short stories for beginners, that sounds like it was a real game changer. Suddenly, the language was in a story.
Right. Context.
Exactly. Context made picking up vocabulary and seeing how sentences work much more, well, engaging and easier to grasp.
Absolutely. Short stories give you that context. They're easier to handle, more interesting, and you see the language actually working, which makes those grammar points from the textbook stick better. It's just a more organic way to learn. From there, they started bringing in visual stuff, videos and movies.
Yeah. And the way they did it was smart, starting with English movies, but with subtitles in their own language.
Okay.
And then eventually switching to English subtitles. It lets you keep track of the story while slowly getting used to the sounds and rhythm of English.
Makes sense.
That initial struggle with understanding fast speech, that's pretty much universal for learners. But the key thing they mention is actively engaging. Pausing the video, writing down new words, even repeating sentences out loud to practice pronunciation. That active stuff makes a huge difference.
And they specifically mention YouTube channels for English learners being helpful. The variety there, simple grammar stuff, everyday chats, it offers different ways to learn, right?
Oh, huge variety. And hearing those real conversations is so important because you get exposed to the natural flow, the little things textbooks often miss.
Yeah, like the speed, slang.
Exactly. That's where you hear the real texture of the language, the speed, the informal bits, the idioms that aren't always obvious on paper.
Right.
It's a good reminder that learning isn't just memorizing lists, it's understanding how people actually talk. And accepting that initial frustration is crucial. It's normal. Focus on slow progress.
Then we get to mobile apps. The whole gamified thing, learning vocab and grammar like it's a game, that can definitely make it feel less like a chore.
For sure. Features like Word of the Day are nice too. A steady little drip of new words.
But as the source points out, just relying on apps has its limits, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They're great for building basics and reviewing things, but they often don't give you enough practice for real back and forth conversations.
Right.
Which just reinforces the need for a mix of methods, a blended approach.
Which brings us naturally to the big one, speaking, often the scariest part.
Oh, yeah.
That fear of making mistakes, the shyness about trying to say things in a new language. Totally understandable hurdles. It's vulnerable.
Definitely. And the strategy they used first, practicing talking out loud to themselves in a mirror. That's actually pretty clever for building confidence without any pressure. Practicing simple intros, talking about your day, describing what's around you. It's about getting comfortable just making the English sounds and sentences.
Yeah.
And that habit of trying to think in English during the day, just narrating what you see. Fantastic way to internalize the language, make it more automatic.
And we shouldn't forget writing. Keeping a notebook for new words and phrases, classic method, still works.
Tried and true.
But actually writing short paragraphs about your day, your thoughts, your goals, That takes it up a notch. It lets you practice grammar more naturally and helps those new words stick in a meaningful way.
Right.
And the source wisely says, don't worry too much about mistakes at first, just focus on getting your ideas out.
That's such a crucial mindset shift. Writing becomes a tool for pulling information back out of your brain, strengthening your grasp of sentence structure. And as you get better, you can tackle longer stuff like emails.
Yeah.
Now, throughout all this self-study, keeping up motivation and being consistent, that's often the real mountain to climb.
Absolutely. The source talks about hitting those plateaus, feeling frustrated when progress feels slow, those days you just want to quit. We've all felt that with something, right?
Oh, yeah. The initial buzz wears off, and then you realize just how much sustained effort it takes. And the hardest bit, they say, is staying consistent after that initial excitement fades. That's where having a realistic schedule, aiming for even just 30 minutes a day, becomes so important.
Establishes a routine.
Exactly. Prevents those long gaps that really kill momentum.
Pronunciation is another common headache, especially if English has sounds your native language doesn't. The strategy mentioned really listening to native speakers and actively trying to copy them. That's key, even if it feels a bit weird at first.
It does feel weird.
Yeah.
But necessary.
Yeah.
And finally, motivation itself. It's not constant. It ebbs and flows.
Right.
The strategies they use, reminding yourself why you started, celebrating the small wins, finding inspiration in other learners' stories, those are all vital for sticking with it long term. It's about feeding that inner drive and seeing how far you've actually come.
Yeah.
So having got through those first steps and challenges, the focus naturally shifts onto building a steady daily practice.
Exactly. And the source gives a really detailed breakdown of what their daily routine eventually looked like. Let's dive into those daily practice methods now. Sounds like mornings were key.
Yes, starting the day by listening to beginner-friendly English podcasts, maybe during breakfast or getting ready, that's a brilliant way to get some passive immersion right away.
Low pressure.
Right. Focusing on just the main ideas, not every single word, helps build comprehension without feeling swamped. And that morning mirror practice, talking about the day's plans, reinforces speaking, gets you thinking in English early on.
And that shadowing technique they mentioned, listening to short clips of native speakers and immediately repeating, that sounds really powerful for pronunciation and rhythm.
It really is. It trains your mouth and ears for the sounds and flow of language, like vocal mimicry.
Okay, so that's the morning. What about the afternoon? It sounds like it shifted to more active stuff.
Yeah, afternoons seem to be more focused on things like reading and writing. Starting with simpler things, children's books, easy articles, makes reading less daunting, more fun, actually.
Good point.
And that habit of writing down new words with example sentences, crucial, helps you see how the word is actually used and makes it stick better.
And the daily paragraph, writing about life, thoughts, goals, that's such a good way to practice grammar and vocab naturally, making it personal.
And using apps then to check grammar gives that instant feedback, helps you spot patterns in your mistakes.
Right.
Plus, the targeted grammar study, focusing on just one rule at a time via apps or YouTube, much less overwhelming than trying to learn all of grammar at once.
Definitely bite-sized chunks. Okay, so then the evening. Sounds like they mixed learning with relaxing.
Yeah, which is key for sustainability, isn't it? Watching English movies or TV shows with subtitles, maybe starting with your own language, then switching to English as you improve, turns chilling out into learning time.
Smart.
And that technique of rewatching scenes, first just for fun, then again focusing on the language, pausing and repeating, that's a really active way to boost listening and speaking.
And then just before bed, a quick review.
Reviewing the day's new words, grammar points, maybe reading something aloud for pronunciation practice, helps cement it all in your brain overnight.
And weekends weren't just off time either.
No, they use weekends for different kinds of exposure. Watching travel vlogs or cooking shows, great for practical vocab. Playing English learning games online keeps it fun.
Right.
Challenging themselves to write emails in English, that's practical application. And joining online language forums means interacting with others.
It sounds like a really well-rounded routine, but maintaining motivation through all that must still be tough.
Oh, for sure. The source is honest about that. Progress feels slow sometimes, frustration creeps in. But that simple trick of tracking progress on a calendar gets you a visual win, shows you're actually putting in the work.
Yeah, I like that.
And realizing you need to balance all the skills, reading, writing, listening, speaking, is important for overall improvement. Don't just focus on one area.
So the final advice seems to be, practice a bit every day, mix it up, find stuff you actually enjoy, and crucially, don't sweat the mistakes.
Exactly. That really sums up the core of successful independent learning. But, even with the best routine, mistakes are going to happen.
Absolutely. And the source was really open about the key mistakes they made along the way, which is super valuable for anyone else trying this.
Gold dust, really.
One of the first ones they mention is spending too much time just on grammar rules without actually speaking.
Ah, the classic trap.
Yeah.
It's so easy to feel like you need perfect grammar before you dare say anything.
Right.
But, like the source found out, that just leads to hesitation, lack of confidence. It actually slows you down from becoming fluent. That fear of messing up grammar can be paralyzing.
Exactly. And another big mistake they flagged was being too scared to speak because you're worried about being judged or making errors. That anxiety is real.
It is. It's that vulnerability, putting yourself out there. But the big realization they had is crucial. You'll never feel 100% ready. Speaking, even with mistakes, is absolutely essential. It's how you build confidence and spot what you need to work on.
And neglecting listening skills, focusing maybe too much on reading and writing, that was another mistake they identified.
Yeah, it's easy to think passive listening isn't as active as producing language, but good listening comprehension is the bedrock of communication, isn't it?
Totally.
Especially since spoken English can be so different from written pronunciation, contractions, slang, idioms. You really need to train your ear with lots of listening.
Then there's the trap of trying to memorize huge lists of vocabulary out of context.
Oh, yeah. Like pouring water into a sieve. If there's no meaningful connection, no idea how the words are actually used, they just don't stick long term.
Right.
Learning vocab in full sentences, in real situations, makes the meaning much clearer, more memorable, and shows you how to use the words properly. It's about the nuances.
And comparing yourself to other learners, feeling discouraged because someone else seems faster, that's a common emotional pitfall.
So common. You see someone chatting away fluently and think, ugh, I'll never get there.
Yeah.
But as the source rightly says, everyone's journey is different. Different backgrounds, learning styles, paces. Focusing on your own progress, celebrating your small wins. Much healthier and more motivating than comparisons.
Finally, inconsistent study habits. Intense bursts followed by long breaks. That undermines progress, too.
Definitely. Consistency, even if it's just a little bit each day, beats sporadic cramming hands down in the long run. It's about building a sustainable habit. So from these very relatable mistakes came some really valuable lessons learned.
Absolutely. And the source really pulls out some key takeaways from those slip-ups. First big lesson. Grammar is useful, sure, but don't let it stop you from speaking.
Right.
Get comfortable talking, even with mistakes at first. That's how fluency develops. Don't wait for perfection, just practice.
That shift away from needing perfect grammar towards just communicating. It's vital. Mistakes aren't failures, they're feedback. Don't wait for that mythical ready moment. Just start speaking even a little bit.
And the importance of actively working on listening skills comes through loud and clear. Focus on the gist, the overall context, not getting stuck on every single word. That builds comprehension better over time.
And the vocabulary lesson is clear, too. Learn words in context. See them in sentences in real situations. Better recall, better usage.
That comparison trap, directly addressed by stressing. Focus on your journey, celebrate your progress, however small it feels. It's about your growth, nobody else's.
Exactly. And the final lesson loops back to consistency. Short, regular practice every day beats infrequent marathon sessions. Build that steady rhythm, make it part of your routine.
Right.
Now, building on those lessons, the source then shared the strategies that they found most helpful for actually learning English on their own.
Yeah, these are the techniques that really move the needle for them. And one of the first, most impactful ones they mention is creating that immersive environment. Consciously surrounding yourself with English every day, even simple things like changing your phone language, following English speakers on social media.
It's about making English a constant background hum in your life, not just something for study time. Those little daily exposures really add up, build familiarity.
And the power of YouTube comes up again, but specifically how to use it effectively.
Right, not just passive watching.
Exactly. Active learning, taking notes, repeating phrases out loud. The sheer variety on YouTube, grammar lessons, real chats, stories means there's something for everyone, whatever your style or need.
And using podcasts and audiobooks effectively was another big one for them, starting with those beginner ones with slower, clearer speech. Great for building listening skills gently and following along with an audiobook text while listening. Fantastic way to connect the written word to the sound. Helps both reading and listening.
Movies and TV shows, not just fun, but serious learning tools, that progression they used. native subtitles than English subtitles.
Yeah.
Plus, rewatching scenes, actively pausing and repeating turns passive viewing into a really effective, engaging exercise.
And finding ways to practice speaking, even when you're alone. Crucial for confidence. Talking to yourself out loud, describing things, even recording yourself on simple topics.
Recording yourself.
Hmm.
Brave, but probably useful.
Surprisingly effective, yeah. Helps you hear yourself objectively, spot things to work on.
And finally, using language exchange apps to actually talk to native speakers and other learners. That seems huge.
Oh, massive. It gives you that essential real-world practice and helps tackle the fear of speaking head-on.
And within speaking itself, they got really specific about techniques.
Like talking to the mirror, but with prepared questions to structure it. Recording your voice to track progress. Preparing topics for language exchanges so you're focused.
Right.
Shadowing, listening, and repeating right after a native speaker. Great for pronunciation, rhythm, intonation. Learning whole phrases, not just single words, boosts fluency. And aiming for clear pronunciation rather than just speed. Makes it easier to understand and builds confidence.
Putting all those strategies together, it paints a picture of a really active, engaged way of learning, doesn't it? Making English a living thing in your daily life, not just a school subject.
Exactly.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive into learning English independently, what are the final key takeaways for everyone listening?
I think the main message is really to embrace the whole journey.
Yeah.
Except that mistakes aren't just likely, they're essential for getting better.
Right.
Consistency mixed with these kinds of practical, varied strategies,
Yeah.
that will lead to real progress and fluency over time. It just takes patience and persistence.
And that brings us to our final thought for you, our listener. Just take a moment, maybe reflect on what really stood out for you from this whole exploration of one person's self-study journey. What's one small, doable step you could maybe commit to taking, even today, to move your own learning forward, whatever that learning might be? Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.